from Columbus to Greenville, eating up the mileage on our horses made of steel. Starting out, we got
Welcome to episode next, I guess, of Motor Mouths. I'm Brian.
I'm Ronnie.
We are the Motor Mouths. So here we are again. Please don't forget to hit subscribe. Get over to our YouTube channel, Ride for Miracles. Again, listen wherever you want on these podcasts. But for the audio portion, if you want to see it, get on over to...
Revert to the first episode for that.
Wait a minute. Can you see audio?
Yes, I guess you can because I said so. So, dude, we are in the dog days of summer. So
Hot.
And expensive, hasn't it? Air conditioning at the shop?
Oh, yes. Well, it's just the nature of the beast, you know. It's middle of summer, air conditioning goes out. You gotta get it. I mean, there's no doing without it here in the South. But it's hot. So it's nice this morning, though.
It is. It's real nice.
It's our first morning shoot.
It is. And we're out here in God's country. We're out here at Scott's. So without any further ado, hey, let's welcome Scott.
Woo!
How about guys? Good morning.
Good morning. So it was beautiful driving out here this morning. You know, it's a little foggy. I know we're in a group chat, and from time to time you send us pictures of your Sunday mornings that just get me. It could even be, it was, I think, just a couple weeks ago when it was still really hot, but you had a fire going out there, and all you could hear is the crackling of the fire. If you listen real close, you maybe heard the deer walking up, but God, this has to be so peaceful.
You know, it's incredibly peaceful, and I know, like when Ronnie came out here and set up this morning, there was a deer standing right out there looking at him through the window, trying to figure out who's that strange man in my dad's barn.
Yeah. It's really nice out here. So we are sitting in your, I don't want to call it a man cave. We really need to take a walk around and look at all the cool stuff you got hanging in here. I know you've got things from your grandfather. Do you still have that log splitter?
Yep.
And you've got a lot of tools, and this place is really cool. This would put any museum to shame with all the neat stuff you have in here.
You know, a lot of it is stuff that I remember as a child growing up, and you know, so I was fortunate enough to be able to get some of that stuff from my grandparents, and even if I didn't get it from them, it's stuff I picked up along the way. And it reminded me of growing up in a small little southwestern town in Minnesota, and you know, to be able to get that stuff, put it in my barn, man cave, whatever you want to call this, it just brings me back to that time in my life.
Yeah,
it's kind of peaceful.
So great segue. Let's go there. So I know last year was my first time in Ruthven, but you've been through there before, right?
Right.
And so you're talking about Ruthven, Minnesota. Tell me about Ruthven, because I just fell in love with that town. If there was a hotel there, I would love to stay there.
Well, you know, that's actually you don't need a hotel, because that's Ruthven. You go there and somebody put you up. You don't have to have a hotel. You just go out on one of the farms and you can spend the night on the farm. I remember my very first motorcycle trip. I got that motorcycle in 1999, and in August, Jim and I rode to Sturgis. I never rode a motorcycle in my life, but we're going to ride to Sturgis. And so we went through Minnesota, went into Ruthven, and I wanted to show him, you know, this is where I spent my summers. This is where I grew up. This is where I kind of learned to be a kid, I guess. And, you know, he was wondering the same thing. Where are we going to stay? And he said, we're going to stay on the farm, you know. So we went out to one of my grandparents' friends, and my grandmother was actually staying there. And it was an old farmhouse, and I mean, it was out in the middle of big cornfields, and it was, you know, I got to experience that growing up, but Jim got to see it firsthand. He's never been into that Midwest town and a small 300-person farming community, you know, and it just being able to share that with him, and then be able to share that with you guys, you know, that was kind of a cool thing to do, that to take y'all back to Ruthven and on this last ride that we did, and you get to experience kind of where I grew up, and just the genuineness of people in that community. That it just blows me away that, you know, we get to see that, get to experience that, and it was very special to me to go back. I mean, the town's totally different than it is, you know, now. It's just small towns, everybody moves out of the small towns. Everybody, when you're growing up, I'm sure you guys all experienced it. I experienced it. We're living here in Columbus or across the river over there in Phoenix City, Smith Station area. When I get older, I'm going to move to Atlanta or I'm going to move to the big city. And that's what happens to the small towns, unfortunately. Young people feel like there's nothing for them to do there, and then they pack up and go. And unfortunately, the towns start shriveling up and dying. But I don't know, Roofton is a cool place. It just, I feel home when I go back there.
I felt that way too. It still has that small town charm, even though it's not what it was when you were living there, but it still had that same feel, the same characteristics. The farms are still there for the most part, and we got to meet a lot of the people there and everything. So you talked about your grandmother and everything, so kind of transition now. Tell us about your parents, about your mom and your dad, where they're from, and how that came about with you.
Well, so my mom, she was born right there in Minnesota. They tell the story about her brother when he was born. He was so small, this is before there were high-risk nurseries or anything like that, and so they put him in a turkey roasting pan and put him in the oven. No joke. And they didn't turn the oven on, I don't think.
Was that the first giraffe omnibus?
Well, we could buy a lot of those.
Right. They're cheaper. You just went to the hardware store, and you buy this
medical supplies.
Yeah, you buy this turkey roasting pan, and they put him in there, and they just kind of, I guess the pilot light was on in there or something. Left the door open, and that's how they kept him warm.
That's amazing.
It is. And maybe that's why my grandmother was such a good cook. I'm not really sure. But now my mom was born there. That's the house that I would spend my summers in, was the house that she was raised in. She had a sister and a brother, and my mom, she had this incredible work ethics, and that's because of my grandmother and my grandfather. I'm sure that was really where that came from, because they, back in that era, everybody just, you worked, you went in, you worked hard, you tried to, do the best you could do. My grandparents were growing up in the Depression, so they saved everything that you possibly could save. Even to this day, at the end of my grandmother's life, I remember her taking aluminum foil and straightening it out and folding it back up so she could reuse it. That's just the era they grew up in. So my mom, there was a school there. I think her graduating class was 23 or 33 or some crazy number like that. In the school, one school building, and the school building was kindergarten to senior in high school. Everybody was in the same building. Most of the kids that were in the school came in from the farm. They would either ride their bike 4 or 5 miles, or they'd catch the bus, and the kids in town would walk to school. It was
Minnesota.
Uphill in the snow both ways.
And it probably really happened there.
Yeah. Well, it was flat and Roofton, so they didn't have any hills to walk up. But I do remember her telling stories, as the seniors would be responsible for when they would have snow. And they had some serious snowstorms, and they didn't call school. School went on, and the seniors' job was to go around town and gather up the young kids and walk them to school. Mom always talked about that. She'd walk to school in the snowstorm and the blizzards, but they'd have a rope, and all the kids would hang on to the rope, and the senior would lead them to the next house, pick up the next kid,
wow.
Then go to school, and they didn't go uphill. I never heard that story, because it was flat. So I would have questioned that. But, my uncle, he was, football player. They had a 9-man football team, because towns are small. That's what they had. My mom was a cheerleader, so just, that small town. When I would go there as a kid, and the people my mom went to school with, I would get to meet them, and they'd tell me stories about my mom, and, it was kind of neat to hear some of the things that she did as she was growing up. My dad now, he grew up in another town. It was about 23 miles from roofed in a town called Pipestone, Minnesota. And that was a totally different upbringing for him. That was the big city, you know, supposedly in the area. And Pipestone's kind of a cool place. Peace pipe, I don't know if y'all can see it up there on the wall. That's actually from Pipestone, Minnesota. And the only place in the world you can get that pipe is right there in Pipestone, Minnesota. So that red rock that you see that they make pipes out of. So that's the town he grew up in. He was a rebellion. I mean, my dad was.
Now it's all coming together.
Yeah. Yep. My mom was, you know, she was the one that was kind of straight-laced and, you know, didn't veer off the dark path too much. My dad, on the other hand, you know, typical white t-shirt, cigarette pack rolled up in his sleeves, you know, drinking beer, grain belt, you know.
Nectar of the gods, by the way.
Right. So, you know, that was his thing. Now, one story that I did learn about my dad, though, he was really good in track. And he held the Pipestone High School record for the high hurdles for the longest time. But he didn't apply himself. So it was more fun to smoke cigarette and drink beer and run around with his buddies.
Yeah,
so, you know, I get that. You know, it's kind of like what we do. Yeah, I could apply myself, and God knows what I could have been a rocket scientist, but you know, I choose to hang out with y'all. So, well, maybe not. But they met. It's kind of neat how they met, because my grandmother, she worked in a restaurant. It was called Sid and Men's, and it was in Pipestone, because Roofton had a little small restaurant, but it was better for my grandmother to go to Pipestone and work. And she would take my mom, and my mom would wait tables there. My grandmother would be cooking in this little restaurant in Pipestone. And my dad, kind of like you, Ronnie, my dad delivered laundry to that restaurant. Mm. So, and I remember you talking about that you know, one of your first jobs was taking laundry around. So evidently my mom was a looker, I guess, because, you know, my dad had a fancy to her, and you know, he wanted to take her out on a date. My grandmother was probably a little bit leery about that, because, you know, he was a wild child. So, but anyway, that's how my mom and dad, they met at that restaurant there in Pipestone, Minnesota. And kind of the rest is history, I guess, a little bit. I can tell you, my grandparents on my dad's side, they lived in Pipestone, and my grandfather on my dad's side, he was all about racing horses. He was a TV salesman. He was just a salesperson. You know, it's kind of what he did. And then he was named Kelly, and it was Kelly's TV shop. I can see it. You know, they had the old TVs in there. You know, not the 60-footers with the remote. The remote was you get up and turn the channel. You know, so but he sold TVs, but his passion and his love was racing horses. And my grandmother, she was a school teacher. She taught in a one-room schoolhouse. And actually, somewhere sitting in this barn, I have her school bell that she would ring for the kids to come into class when it was time for them to come into class. And we've actually been to where she was born. I mean, you know, think about this. This is my grandmother, and she was born in a sod hut right outside of Mitchell, South Dakota.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of a full circle thing, because, you know, we've stopped at the Corn Palace. We
were there this year.
We were there this year. Mm-hmm. And probably about 5 miles outside of Mitchell, South Dakota, she was born in a sod hut out there in the prairie. You know, just
amazing.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, you stop thinking, my grandmother was born in a sod hut out in the prairie. You know, that's stuff you saw in a little house on the prairie, you know, but that's where she was born. And so, and my dad's parents and my mom's parents were like just totally opposite. And I mean that in a good way, but I had to go visit, and I do say had, because, you know, wasn't really anything we could do when I would go visit my dad's parents. You know, it was kind of prim and proper, and, you know, there were certain things that you could do or couldn't do when you were with my dad's parents. You know, it was kind of, you know, you couldn't wipe your hands on your pants at the dinner table and things like that. With my mom's parents, I could be whatever or whoever I wanted to be. You know, so it was definitely differences there. My mom always talked about, my dad's mom was named Emmy, and so Emmy didn't like my mom. You know, so my mom would say, "You're marrying that girl from Roofton. You know them girls in Roofton. You know how they are." Yeah, it was more my dad. The girls from Roofton were great. My dad was like,
The boys from Sketchstone.
yeah, he was the sketchy one. Yeah. So, but they obviously got married. You know, and funny story. Probably ought not tell this, but Mom, I'm sorry. So, you know, I was born in May, and I was born early. So they got married in November. So you can do the math. And I asked her about that one time, and she said, "Well, you know, winters are pretty rough, and we got stuck in a snowbank." So I did the math some more. I said, "Well, you know, you got married in November, and you already knew that I was there, you know, so that was like August, September maybe." I said, I know Minnesota gets cold, but I don't think it has snowbanks in August and September. I mean, I'm just saying. But I always gave her a hard time. When they did get married, they did have a huge snowstorm, and she was talking about that. And I always would tell her when she was around people, she'd get mortified when I do this. And she would be talking about her wedding day, and she was talking about how cold it was, and the snow was outside, and everything else. I said, I know, I was there. But she kind of get upset about that a little bit, but that's okay. But you know, Roofton, you kind of get to do things in a small town that you would never ever get to do here in Columbus or, you know, other cities. I mean, everybody knows everybody in the town. I can remember I come back, you know, you come back from school and you're in 3rd grade, 4th grade, whatever, it might have even been 2nd grade. And I was telling us, you know, you come back and first question they ask on your first day back at school was, "Well, what'd you do for the summer?" So my turn came around, and I said, "Well, you know, I always would go there in the summer. That's school get out next day. I'm on the airplane. I'm flying to Minneapolis, Minnesota. My grandparents are picking us up and hauling us back to Roofton. And I'd stay in Roofton till the day before school started, and then I'd fly back home." But that one particular summer, and you guys have been in the locker shop. Y'all were in the locker.
Bought some jerky.
Bought some jerky.
Well, I don't think a lot of people don't know what a meat locker is.
No, they don't.
But
yeah,
it was neat to see a meat locker. Look that up.
Yeah. Meat lockers are cool things, and you know, basically what's happening is the farmers are bringing in their beef, you know, and they're going to take their cow and they're going to slaughter it, and they put it in a big box in a big freezer, and it's wrapped up in steaks, hamburger, whatever the case may be. And your name's on this big box in the freezer, so it's a locker. And so when you need meat, instead of going to the grocery store, you go to the locker and pull your steaks out, pull your burgers out, pull out whatever you need to pull out. So I would spend, you know, part of my day in summer would be get up and go help them in the locker. You know, that's pretty cool. I'm going to go in the locker.
How old were you?
I was probably 2nd, 3rd grade, and I would do that every year. You know, so and I think it was 3rd grade when I came back, and you know, one of the farmers had to bring the cow in. The cow had stepped in a gopher hole, broke its leg. Just so be the cow was pregnant, you know, was ready to calve. And so they get her off the trailer. She can't walk. And there's no way she's going to give a normal birth. And they get her into the slaughter room, unfortunately. You know, that's part of life. But the farmer didn't want to lose the calf, you know, because he's got an investment in this calf now. And so they put the cow down. The vet's sitting there. As soon as they put the cow down, the vet goes over there and basically does a C-section, pulls the calf out. You know, so I'm there. I'm drying the calf off. I have a bucket around here too, a big bucket, you know, that has a milk nipple on the end of it. So I'm feeding the calf. The calf follows me all around town and everything, you know, for basically the summer. You know, it's kind of like my calf. You know, finally got it back out to the farm, and I come home and I told that story, and the teacher sent me to the principal's office. The principal and the teacher called my mom and said, we probably need for you to come up here and have a conference with your son, his teacher, and the principal, because your son comes up with some far-fetched stories and just no way any of this happened. And my mom said, well, you know, back then they had those Super 8 videos. My mom said, well, I got the video. You want to see it?
Yeah.
So,
Do you know where those are?
yeah, I actually do have them at my dad's office. I need to take them to Bryce
Bryce.
and let him save them for me.
Sure.
You know, I don't know what's on it, but I got a whole box full of those Super 8 videos that are on there. You know, so you couldn't do that. Even back then, you couldn't do that in Columbus, you know, or you couldn't do that in a big city. A small town gives you the opportunity to go experience all kinds of different things. You know, they talk about, well, figure out what you want to do in life. Well, I got to see what it'd be like to work in a bank. I mean, they had a little small bank there, which there's a story about the bank.
Read the book?
Yeah, read the book. I got to work in the locker. I got to work in the restaurants. I got to, 5 o'clock, kids go into the bar. You're not drinking, but you go into the bar, you see what, it's like in the bar. That's just where everybody met right at 5 o'clock. 6 o'clock whistle goes, everybody goes home and eats dinner. I got to ride around with the vet, see what the vet does. So you get to experience all kinds of different things. And, my grandfather was a blacksmith. I said, well, it's kind of cool. You get, what do I want to do in my life? And you kind of get to see all that firsthand. And that's, I think that kind of formed me or shaped me or did something. But the part I liked the most was when my grandmother would be in the bar and there'd be a slash restaurant in there. She'd be in there cooking and I'd help her cook. And I don't know, that's probably where the restaurant got born in me. It was in Minnesota.
So you talked about how you like to watch me on my rookie ride and you got to, watch me experience all this stuff. Well, when we ride behind Scott and we get up into Iowa and Minnesota and Nebraska and Indiana and all these states, and there's farming going on in May. We're riding down the road and Scott's going like this. He's checking out all the equipment. He's looking at you know what I saw this summer? I saw it was a big machine, GPS guided, that was spraying fertilizer.
Yeah.
And it was going down the field, and there's no farmer, there's no diesel, what is going on? The booms were out and it was spraying the field. What?
I know.
That's not farming.
Yeah, it's changed so much. This. My grandfather, being a blacksmith, now when you think of blacksmith, you think of making ornamental, decorative stuff is what they do. He was, he was a lifeline for the farmers. Something would break, it didn't matter what time of day, what time of night it was, whatever. The farmer's out in the field working, trying to get grain in or pick his corn or do whatever, and it'd be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, something break. I mean, the phone would ring and he would be up at his shop getting what he needed to go out to the field and fix whatever he needed to fix, or they'd bring it in to him if they could bring it in. The community all supported each other and did everything. And that's probably where I got that sense of community, to be honest with you, is because you get to see that firsthand. You get to see people helping each other and doing what it needs to make life better for your neighbor. And that I got to witness that firsthand as a kid. So he was, I know World War II was coming and all his buddies were, everybody was going, he was on the train. He was going to, I'm not sure where he was going to. And they didn't really have boot camp per se like you do now, where you go to Fort Bend and you enlist and you do. I mean, they were just grabbing every able-bodied man there was to send them overseas. And they were going down the line. And he had a friend of his name was Ralph. They called him Piccolo. He was with him and they asked, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? My grandfather said he was a blacksmith. And they asked, well, what do you do as a blacksmith? And he told them, you're more important to be home to make sure that we have food to help these farmers out. So that popped him off the train and sent him back home. So who knows how life would have changed. Just that. So I think that's another sense where I get where there's no job that's more important than anybody else's job. Yeah, he was a blacksmith, but he was damn important to that community. So that's, well, you're a dishwasher. Well, let the dishwasher leave and see how quick the restaurant shuts down. So everybody's job's important. Never look down on anybody because of what they do. And I think I learned that in Minnesota as well.
Yeah. So, real quick before we move on into more about you, do people still come up to you and say, "Your mom taught me how to swim"? How long did she do that? Because she taught my grandkids.
Yeah.
Taught one of my nephews.
Yeah. My mom taught thousands and thousands and thousands of kids to swim. And I probably watched her teach thousands and thousands of kids to swim. I even helped her sometimes during the summer. I would help her. I learned to swim in Minnesota. She learned to swim in Minnesota. And went out to Twin Lake and you'd swim. The only thing, you get out of Twin Lake, you might have a leech this big on your leg, when you got out there. And then you hit the panic button as a kid. But, that's where she taught. And she really didn't envision teaching thousands and thousands and thousands of kids. It just, something happened. A good friend of hers had a child that went outside, fell in the pool, and drowned. My mom, in her wisdom, decided, that should not happen. There ought to be something that could help if that situation arises again. And sure, she taught, I don't know how old your kids or your nephew was when she brought them up here, 6, 7.
That's probably
5,
4.
I think Piper was 4.
And those are cool to watch those little kids learn to swim. But I think the part that just blew me away the most is you get one that's 6 months old, 4 months old. She's not going to teach them to swim, but she would go to the edge of the pool, drop them in the pool. Parents would be like, they're going to float. I mean, they come back to the top, and they're, she would tell them, been in water for 9 months, They come up to the top, and she'd, be in the pool with them when they came up, and she'd kind of spin them around, and teach them to reach over there and grab a hold to the side and scream and cry and do whatever you need to do, but hang on to that side. And they get a little older, she'd teach them how to hike their leg up and crawl out of the pool. And I watched it. I couldn't tell you how many times I watched it, and I was amazed every single solitary time that, that it was just natural for that kid to do that. And then all they needed is somebody to kind of guide them and coach them to that. And, it's, I don't know, it just, people come to me all the time. My mom was having swimming lessons at your mom's house when she was a little girl, and then I came and she brought me. It's just generation after generation. It just, I couldn't tell you how many people. She taught a guy by the name of Zeke that was totally blind. She taught him how to swim. She's got a piece of pottery that he made for her. Then Elena Amos, when they were doing the tower and they put a pool up there on the parking deck, she had no idea how to swim. We were living in Mohina Woods at the time, and she was teaching swimming, and after all the kids were done swimming, she'd do 4 or 5 lessons a day. This black Rolls Royce would pull up. Elena Amos would get out of that Rolls Royce. She'd have on her little bathing suit and go back to the back, and my mom taught her how to swim.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just amazing. It's just amazing how many people she taught. I wish I had the number.
So that could be where making a difference in one child's life came from.
That was the exact thought that just popped into my head.
Yeah.
She definitely made a difference in a lot of kids' life.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's kind of, we say that, the whole purpose is right, is to make a difference in one child's life. We've touched a lot of kids. My mom touched a lot of kids, and that was just, that was her legacy, along with her catering and stuff. The legacy that she left behind was primarily teaching kids to swim.
She sent me to the crying room. There really is a crying room.
There is a crying
and
room.
I did go, because what she was doing to my grandbaby.
Right. No, she you should have grew up with her. I mean, she didn't take anything off of anybody anytime. I don't care who you were.
And she was...
Yeah, she was about 4'6".
Yes, but remarkable
Yeah,
lady.
she would, if the parents were acting out, because look, you brought your child here, you want me to teach your child to swim. You're not helping matters by being over here panicking, getting all upset and doing everything. So why don't you just go upstairs to the crying room where the adults, and, you can watch from up there, and when we're done, you can come down. So,
It was tough.
Yeah,
It was tough.
it's hard. It's hard
my
to sit there
baby.
and watch that. Yeah, it's your baby, and
And my baby knows how to swim, and my
Yeah.
baby is safe and knows how to get in and out of a pool. So
yeah, exactly.
grateful for
Still to this day, I don't know how she could tread water. I mean, she would have 6 hours of swimming classes, and she would tread water for 5 of those 6 hours. And it was effortlessly. I mean, I'm out there. She's out there, her arms are just kind of flowing back and forth, and she's out there in the deep end. Oh, Johnny would jump off the rock and swim to her, and she'd grab him, put him back on his shoulder, and then he'd be hanging there crying and whatever, and then the next one to jump, and she's just treading water, and there's a small child hanging on her back, and the next one comes, she'd get them. So I'm like, how in the world do you do that? It just is, She was an amazing lady, and she definitely taught a whole bunch of kids how to swim. So who knows how many lives she saved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we talked about her making a difference in one child's life, which we kind of put together, maybe transitioned and brought you into making a difference in one child's life. So tell us how the very first ride got started.
Well, I was doing stuff at the hospital. I was helping with Celebrity Classic and a few other things, and that went on for a couple years. I was, worked closely with the foundation and Karen in the foundation, and Jennifer Joyner was there at that time. Sandy Luwak was there. All these folks that are still a very important part of the ride were there, and they worked for the foundation. So they had this grandiose idea to give me a surprise birthday party. And I found out about the surprise birthday party, and you know what? I remember going into Karen's office and said, I know about this party, and I don't want a surprise party. Can we just do something different? I said, no, all right, it's not going to be a surprise now, but we still want to do it. And I said, Karen, I'm not even going to be here. I'm going to be on my motorcycle. I've had it for 10 years, I guess, at that point. I got it in 99. This is 2009. And I was getting ready to turn, what year would that be? 50.
50.
Yeah, I was getting ready to turn 50. And, I've always loved to travel. I always loved, I got some gypsy in me some kind of way, I guess. I'm not really sure, but I always loved to travel. Always loved being on the open road and not being confined on the interstate. I like America, and I like real America. And I'd been kicking it around in my head to do something like that. It was kind of just back there. And I thought, what, 50, it'd be really cool to ride all 50 states, when I turned 50. That would be a cool thing to do. And I can still remember sitting in her office, and all this is churning in my head, and that's why I said, I've already got this plan, Karen. I'm gonna ride all 50 states for my 50th birthday, and that's really what I want to do. I'd rather me do that, and then let's figure out a way that we could raise some money for the NICU, some kind of way. What would they need? And, you know, the draft omni bed is obviously what came up, and so she looked at me dumbfounded, and she really wanted to do this surprise birthday party, and I said, you know, my mind's made up. I won't be at a surprise birthday party. She said, well, let me think about this idea, and I'll get with the board, you know, the foundation board. And the next morning she calls me, and she said, well, I talked to the board and kind of told them what your idea was, and we felt like, you know, if we could raise enough money to buy a draft omni bed, which was $32,000 at the time, you know, that would make a good contribution to the NICU unit. It would give us, or give them, something to talk about with the NICU unit, and the board's all in agreement that, you know, we'll get behind this and we'll help you fulfill your dream of riding all 50 states. And I remember hanging up, and I like, damn, now I actually got to do this. Oh, how am I going to do this? And I got to think, I can't actually ride to Hawaii, so that ain't going to work. You know, and I like, and Alaska's a long way up there. And I thought about it during the day. I think I called the next morning. I said, well, Karen, probably not a good idea because I can't do all 50 states. You know, I'll possibly do the lower 48. And so we hashed this plan that I was going to do it. I was going to leave the 1st of May, be gone 21 days because I was born on May 21st. You know, don't ask me where 21 came from, but that's where I just pulled it out of my head. That we'll do it in 21 days. And I don't even remember what day I got home on. It was a 21-day ride, but I don't know if it. We leave on the first Friday because the first Friday is a day for the hospital where they do something with Children's Miracle Network. So
I think it's called Miracle Friday.
Miracle Friday, yeah, I think that's what it was called. It's Miracle Friday. So we're going to leave on Miracle Friday. We're going to be gone 21 days. So leave, and there was probably, I don't know, 8 people there when I left, maybe. You know, and we had the goal of raising that money. I had no idea where I was going. I kind of had an idea. GPSs weren't like GPSs are now. I had a little handheld GPS that I attached to my bike, and had a Mr. Cole Atlas. You know, so I had my Mr. Cole Atlas. I had a little GPS. I had a thing called Spot that would track you. So that's where we got where they would track us as we were going, or track me as I was going. And no hotels. And I was just going to get a hotel whenever I got tired and felt like I needed to stop. And I left out. It was a beautiful day. I remember it was like perfect morning. It was just like one of those Mays that you're riding, and you know the weather's just right. It's not hot, and that next morning I get up and I, you know, cut down, hit the corner of Florida down there, and moved on a little bit further west, and then the rain came, and it came, and it kept coming. And it was brutal. What in the world? And we didn't do any. I mean, there was no TV or anything. It was, I would take a picture or two, send it in to Jennifer. She would edit whatever I wrote and correct all my spelling. You know, and that's basically all the communications that we had. You know, it was every now and then I might have talked to him on the radio. And there was no TV coverage. Like, I mean, there's Scott's out there, you know, and then they'd show a blip where I might be off a spot. And I know my first visit was going to be at a hospital in Texas. And you guys that went on that first ride as a group, do you remember what it was like riding into Texas? And it was foggy. You couldn't see 2 feet in front of you. and it was that way. And I had to make that hospital stop for the next morning. And it was raining so bad and so foggy, I couldn't go any further. I had to stop. I was probably 7,500 miles from the hospital, but it just, I fatigued from riding in the rain. The wind was brutal. I couldn't see, it was dark. So I stopped and got a hotel, and I said, I'll just get up in the morning early and I'll leave and go. I got up in the morning, nothing had changed. The weather was the same. It was foggy. I gotta make it. I cannot let these people down. They're counting on me to be there. And so I get to the hospital drenched, and they tour me through the hospital. I get to see the NICU there, and eventually the sun did come out, and eventually, I got into more inclement weather, but there was no plan other than
No plan. What?
Nothing has changed.
What?
That's it.
No plan.
No plan. Nothing's changed. That's what I got. I kept going, and I was paranoid that I was going to miss something on the state somewhere, and I made some wrong turns. I mean,
no, a wrong turn and no planning.
So that's
don't feel so bad now.
Yeah, that's what set the whole prefaces for the ride. And I dirt roads by mistake.
I think Gary does that on purpose.
He laughs.
Him and Julie just got back from a ride, and they hit a dirt road that was like 6 miles long.
Yeah,
I think he does that on purpose.
I remember being on that damn dirt road, and I come around the corner. And there are damn cows coming down the road, and about 4 or 5 guys on horses are driving cattle. And I'm like, I got nowhere to go. And cows ain't got nowhere to go, so I'm just sitting in the middle of the road. I mean, cows come on either side of the road. I mean, I could pat them as they went by. I wish we would have had live feedback, or would have had live feedback then, but it was unbelievable. There's a picture of it somewhere in the archives of the rides, but
we'll try to find it.
We need
to find that one.
Try to find
it. So it was, I met people, and I just this is what this is all about, getting out and seeing the lower 48 and doing it on your motorcycle. But the most important thing to me was I got to meet some really neat people, and I got to tell some stories, nothing like the stories we get to tell now, because I didn't really even understand what the NICU was real well back then, and told them what I was doing. Never had an issue anywhere. I had a little bit of bike trouble, imagine that, but
bike trouble?
That was 10 years prior to what we're doing. 18 years prior now to what we're dealing with now. But
yeah, it was like,
it was only a 10-year-old bike, man.
It was only 10 years old. That's why I only had a little bit of bike trouble. The gas is always an issue, obviously, and I got out on the road with a wrong turn somewhere, and it was like the movie, you pass the sign, next gas 110 miles, that I didn't see it. So I'm riding along, I said, I'm in trouble. I can't go back this way. Next town's who knows how far that way. And there's a farmer, he was out there at his mailbox, and I just asked him, I said, I'm going to get out here and I'm going to be stranded. Is there a gas station anywhere close by that I might could go? And he said, come on back to my house, follow me down the gravel driveway. And about a mile driveway to his damn house back there, and where his tractor barns and everything were. He said, I just got diesel and I got regular gas. I said, regular gas? I'd even try diesel at this point, but and so he pulled, the big tank sit up there in the air on the stands, so it's a gravity fed thing, and he fills up the tank for me, and I ask him, what I need to give you? He said, because I'm telling him the story while I'm out here doing what I'm doing, and I can buy you a little bit of gas. Have a safe trip. That's That's why I say, you know, what we see on the news and what we're pumped into us all the time is not what it's like in America. I mean, there's so many people that are good out there, you know. And I mean, who knows where I wound up and what I've been doing if I ran out of gas out there in the middle of nowhere. Somebody probably would have stopped and hauled me in.
Definitely.
You know, but he went out of his way to keep me on the road. So, and that's what we see all the time when we're on the road is the goodness of everybody.
Absolutely.
That quote you shared with us, I'm sure it was something Facebook, whatever, but it's being attributed to a German soccer fan and said, if you want to hate America, watch the news.
Yeah.
If you want to love America, drive through it.
Yeah.
And I thought that you've been saying that to us for years.
Years. It is so true. You know, that's what. It's easy to get wrapped up in what's bad in the world, and if you close your eyes to that and open up your mind and open up your heart and open up your eyes, you see what's really good with this country and what the people are like. You know, and that's one of the things that motivates me and keeps me wanting to do this. So it's just the people we get to meet. So, you know, people, what's the best part of the country you ever rode in? I can't pick. I love the desert. I love the farmland like you talked about. I love riding by there watching them planting fields. I mean, it's just, you know,
the smell of that fresh plowed
slinging manure.
Well, not so much.
But that's what we're doing.
that fresh plowed dirt is some smell that you just cannot replicate.
No.
And there is something about that's
and you get to experience that on a motorcycle. You know, in a car, you don't get to experience
Correct.
that. In a motorcycle, you get to feel the air change. You get to smell the different smells, you know. Okay, so it was a skunk that was been dead on the road for 3 days, but you get to experience all that.
It's all part of it.
So it is. It's 100% part of that. And that just, you know, the country's beautiful. The people are better.
I agree. So now, speaking of the country,